Hello and welcome to Forgotten Temples with myself, Mr. B. Now don't you just love it when you turn up somewhere and you're perfectly dressed? I used to attend a lot of dinner parties and balls in Oxford, and I would wear a black tie like James Bond does in the movies. But on this occasion it's purely accidental, because look, I have the Western buckle and of course my trusty Stetson hat, and to me this looks for all the world like the entrance to some Wild West ranch. I could be back in the Wild West. I mean, I'm perfectly attired for the whole situation. But where I am, in fact, is deep into Thailand. I have been travelling for some days and it's been a very difficult journey. A entire day has passed just to come to here. So this is now day 2 and this is my first temple, and it is an absolute treat because this temple was built by Jayavarman VII. But I'm going to have to subtract the word temple there, because what this in fact is a hospital. And there was hospitals along the whole roads, you see. When you're building an empire, and imagine you've got these roads snaking outwards, which are the arteries that go back towards, you know, the central cities like Angkor Wat. Along those roads, Jayavarman VII built hospitals. And this is one of those sites. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see. The whole aspect of the Wild West still hasn't left us. And the reason is I have been to the Alamo in Texas when I was very young. And this has a familiar sort of shape to it. It's very blocky, it's very solid. It's almost like it's fortified. It has this very square sort of nature to it, like a fort. But it is, as we know, in fact a hospital. Now before we go in, I need to show you something over here, which I think is rather interesting. But as we stand here, we can't forget what happened here, because that's what brings sites like this to life. I mean, I'm sure a plethora of people turn up and they never ever really think about it. But if you carry the imagination of a child, you can see wonders. Things unfurl in front of you. And when I found this was a hospital, the first thing I thought of was people being carried from far away. There wasn't many hospitals. That's the first thing you need to remember. They weren't everywhere. So they could have been on the road for days in pure agony, and then they would have been carried on a litter, on a stretcher, through this very doorway. And what you need to imagine is when those patients saw this sight is as to how they must have felt. There must have been a huge sense of relief that at long last, through their struggle and through their pain, there was to be some relief maybe. So this place is very much sanctuary. It was the end of the road. It wasn't just a hospital. It was the hope that there may well be life yet to live. Now this is what I wanted to show you. It's this pool. It is absolutely square. It's symmetrical in every way. It's been here for nigh on 1,000 years and it looks like it was built yesterday. And if we look through the eyes of a child, our eyes of wonderment, and we ask questions, it tells quite the story. So we need to imagine that our traveller that's come from oh so far in absolute agony has arrived here at this hospital. But why is this pool here? What was it used for? Was it a bathing pool, or was it reserved only to be used as drinking water and for cooking? Well, the answer potentially lays in the 1800s. Yes, the Victorian era. And it's in London we could look. Because back then, in those Victorian days, London was known as the Great Stink. It was a cesspool. There was dead dogs and horses laying around and in the rivers. There was excrement everywhere. It was quite simply appalling. And a lot of people got very sick with cholera. And everybody, and I mean everybody, assumed that it was due to the foul air. That was until John Snow turned up, and he studied it, and he said, no, I think it's in the water. But no one believed him. With much lobbying and a Herculean effort, he had the pump handle removed from a single water pump, because in that area around this pump, cholera had broken out, and he said, it's in the water, it's in the water, remove the handle. So they did. They took the handle off the pump, and guess what? Cholera in that area stopped immediately. And he proved his point. He proved everybody wrong, all the doctors saying, you know, it was in the air. And in that one simple move, John Snow saved tens, if not hundreds of thousands of lives, because nobody ever thought to look in the water. So why is this relevant to us? Well, if it took till the 1800s in the most advanced city in the world, London, to work that out, then we can assume that here they also didn't think of the water that way, that disease laid within it. Well, they may have. But what they certainly would have done is boiled it. I will guarantee that. They knew that boiling water made it safe. So we can assume that this beautiful pool could have been for bathing, for cleansing wounds, as well as a vital supply of water for drinking and for cooking. So we have been on quite the journey, and we haven't even gone through the front door yet, because we know that our imaginary patient has travelled far through dust and all sorts for days. He's in pure agony. Potentially he was bathed in that pool that we've just seen. But there's two levels of care here. In the West, well, in the modern world, we have just one level, which is the focus is very much on medicine, and they did have medicine in these ancient times. But through this door was the second level of care. So it is through this door we need to go and find out what was the next step. So you are him, you're a patient over 1,000 years ago, and you go through this doorway screaming in agony. Your body may well now have been cleansed, and maybe it's a festering wound. Why don't we have one of those? We have a festering wound which has been treated and now wrapped in some leaves and some herbs. As we enter, we look to our left and to our right, and we see these small antechambers. But that second level of care I spoke of is here, at the heart of this temple. And that is the gods themselves. Gods themselves. It is the gods that made this hospital. They're the ones, the reason for it being built. And through this doorway, a long time ago, would have been an actual god in the form of a statue that would have stood towered here. But alas, it's been looted. So, this temple, as many would see it, has quite the story to tell. And it even took us back to Victorian England and one of my heroes, Dr. John Snow, as we try to decode as to what this building was all about. But what it is, in its primary focus, is a place of hope. I mean, let's just relate back to our tale. Our patient with his festering wound had travelled for days and days on a dusty road, and when he came here for the first time, he saw hope that the beautiful light of life would not be extinguished. His wounds would have been bound, and not only that, he would have referred to the gods, looking for their blessing, for their help in his recovery. And what I'm pleased to say with our imaginary case is he did survive. Why not have a happy ending to our tale? But it wasn't just him. In our imaginary world, there would have been thousands of people who would have come here to this very place, gone through this very doorway, and would have been treated at this ancient hospital that was built by that most wondrous of Kings Jayavarman VII. And of those patients, many would have survived. And we can say this with some certainty, because what you need to remember was the empire was so big and so sprawling. They weren't just swapping trade, they were swapping knowledge. So they would have had medical information and new techniques and routines that would have been learnt from far away. I mean, they were trading heavily with the Indians. So knowledge would have gone down those trading paths. And the knowledge of medicine has always been held very precious by man, because after all, what is more valuable than life itself? I very much hope you've enjoyed this quick trip around an ancient site that is far away in a mystical land. And if by chance you could help me build this library of ancient and sometimes abandoned and forgotten temples, then I would be deeply grateful. And how you do that is you go to www.patreon.com/temples. Simple as that. Until next time, I wish you absolutely nothing but, of course, the very best. You take good care now.